Let's get into the after party now. My favorite show in this show. It's the link, by the way. Thank you, Dial Rentone. They like this. Thank you. Carrier, IT&E, Cabo Enterprises. Thank you to our sponsors. This Monday, November 2nd episode of The Link. It's 9:13. Let's jump right into the KUAM News Zoom room where they just about wiped out the virtual shoe pile. And we have Victoria Lola Leon Guerrero from Independent Guahan and just a bunch of different groups. Good morning, Victoria.
Day. Good morning, Chris and Bree.
We also have Julian Jansen from the Progressive Democrats PAC. Just, full disclosure, I did put out the invitation to the Action PAC and also the Guam Association of Realtors PAC just because, I wanted, hey, let's get on here. One last push. However, they weren't able, or they declined the invitation. So we got Julian from the Progressive Democrats. Good morning, Julian.
Good morning. How are you?
Very good. We also have Joey Crisostomo, a former Republican Party of Guam chair. Good morning, Jerry.
Buenas. Half a day.
And we have Sean Gumatauta, who was the communications guy for the Camacho administration. He's got a bunch of different titles, Bree.
A whole bunch. He also is over at the University of Guam. He's Gets Guam. I'm trying to think what else.
Hey, that means that life after politics is real.
Yeah,
that's what that means.
It can happen. You don't always got to be in the game. And we have Phil Leon Guerrero, who did comms for the Calvo Tenorio administration, and currently is are you the chief or something that Senator Regine Bisco leads? He's basically the head guy there. Senator.
Something is good enough. Yeah, thanks.
I don't know if you just got promoted.
I actually want to say Todes Hamzu because it's been a while since I've been in the presence of enough people to say that. So thanks for having me.
I don't know if Public Health's going to shut us down with this many people in the Zoom room. We also got Dr. Mike Bavacqua, who's with the Finogi Coalition and Independent Guahan, and again, just a bunch of different people. Good morning, Maguette.
Buenas. Buenas y todos Hamzu.
And we have Peter J. Santos, one of my favorite guys on social media. We had him on in the after party, and, Bree was like, let's get that guy back on. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, Chris. I just want to say, I'm glad to make it here because my oxygen levels have been hovering dangerously low at 91. And just thank you for your prayers and all your support. Thank you very much.
You got to put the camera like really up close to your face. You got uncomfortably close. Yeah, closer. Okay.
I have a feeling I know where this is going to go.
Yeah. All right. So, and we're just going to go ahead and start there. We figured the hottest race, I think, it doesn't have as many bodies in it as the legislative race, but I think the congressional race, this is huge. It's big. It's been hot. All of the candidates, most of them have really stepped up and campaigned hard, have, put their message out there. Of course, the challengers, former Congressman Robert Underwood, Senator Will Castro. And this kind of a weird, because there was no primary, it's turned into a three-man race, right? And the incumbent Congressman Michael St. hasn't really campaigned. He is the incumbent, though, and so we just want to kind of run down the line with you guys. Your thoughts on the congressional race. If you could, grow a pair, or you just maybe tell us who you think is going to take this. None of this, we don't endorse anybody. Just your thoughts here on who do you think is going to take it and why, and just maybe what you also think about the race in general, because this has been, I think, one of the most exciting, engaging, entertaining races, since the last gubernatorial election, right? Just a couple years ago. So we'll go ahead and start with you, Peter.
Well, one of the things I wanted to point out, Chris, is an observation that I've had is a lack of endorsements of the sitting congressman by any of the local politicians. We've got local politicians and past politicians and dignitaries supporting his other two challengers, but not him. And then no one is asking him to endorse them. So a lot of people are distancing themselves from him. So I'm wondering what's going on with that. As far as Who's going to take it? Whether Robert or Will take it? That's those two have been charging hard. I've been seeing Will out there, pounding the pavement. I've been seeing all the ads that Robert's been putting out. So it's a toss-up. I mean, maybe offline we'll make a bet. I'll give you your choice. Who you gonna take, and I'll take the opponent or the other one. But I know for sure, Miguel is his rosary starts for his career. The rosary for his career starts at November 4th.
Thank you, Peter. Phil Flores, of course. I didn't get to introduce you because you weren't showing up in the Zoom. But again, Phil Flores, we had you on a great after party, Republican Party guy, long time. And thanks for coming on again, Phil. And we'll just kick it over to you next. Your thoughts on this congressional race, Phil Flores. It's connecting audio. Okay, we'll come back to Phil.
There he is.
Okay, Phil, you're there. Phil, your thoughts on this congressional race?
Are you talking to me?
Yes, sir. Phil with an F.
Oh, sorry. I would pop
One L.
reboot my computer. That was so terrible. Wow. Will's on it, so I got to be very polite. So, but it's going to be exciting. It's kind of strange, MSM having to go into quarantine and then catching viral pneumonia, which is no fun at all. So it's kind of taken the wind literally out of his sails, I would think. And I would look it to be between my primo Robert and my good friend Will.
So between those two.
That's what I think. Just because, Mike's been gone, he hasn't been staying in touch much, and then when he had the opportunity to come on back, then unfortunately he gets sick,
right?
And which is it's like the worst time. It's like it's like the worst time. The final days of campaigning, and a lot of it's virtual on your social media and such. So much of it is still eyeball to eyeball and
right,
physical to physical, I guess. Yeah. And that opportunity has been taken away from him.
Let's go over to the other Phil here. God, I hate to call you the other Phil, but Phil Leon Guerrero. Phil, your thoughts on this race?
Yeah, I'll tell you what I found most disappointing about the unfortunate set of circumstances that the congressman finds himself in. He had a prime opportunity when he appeared on your show, breaking a blacklist that he's had for you for practically his whole term. And instead of talking about the issues that matter to the tens of thousands of people that are unemployed, instead of maybe taking stock over the fact that he's privileged enough to have healthcare in this time of COVID, what I heard was a lot of personal attacks. What I heard was a lot of personal concern. What I heard was a lot of minor issues playing into what could be the only interview that he has with KUAM, the only interview that he will have to a mass audience before an election. And I found that was the most unfortunate and the most disappointing thing about the congressman contracting viral pneumonia when he comes back to Guam for this final push. I guess I'll be bold and say that I'm voting for Robert Underwood just because I think he's the best of the three candidates that are out there. I hope that he wins, but with the low turnout, that's a real cause of concern for me for a whole bunch of races, especially for the delegates race, which is, I think, the only one that requires a 50% plus one majority. So I'm not sure if he's going to be able to take it in this first general election, but I certainly hope that he does.
Thanks, Phil. Let's move over to Victoria. Hi, Victoria. It's good to see you. It's been a while.
Good day. Nice to see you too.
What are your thoughts on?
Yeah, I mean, for me, a lot is too. It really boils down to how big someone's sort of online perceived following truly is in the polls. So, if we look online and we see kind of all the responses that the only place that the congressman really speaks to the people is his Facebook page. We don't hear from him anywhere, and I agree completely with Phil that this was the first time he was on the link, and for those of us that listen to the link daily, that was like, whoa, wait a minute, right? And instead of exactly using that moment to speak to the people, that's not what happened. And he hung up on you guys. And, it was sort of like, not only has KUAM or other news outlets been trying to speak with the congressman for years, not even just months, but even all the political forums that are happening that are really important, they really create a space for these candidates to speak to the issues directly. Right. He's blown off. And so, to kind of come home and then be very upset with everybody because we want to hear from him, and maybe we're not giving him enough sympathy while he's feeling ill, or questioning the way in which he went about quarantining himself. It really was kind of sad. But if you look online, it's like everybody is still kind of supporting him in the same way that they always have. And so to me, that's going to be a true indicator how much time candidates spend on the internet versus how much they go through more traditional means of reaching the community, right? I think the polls will help all of us understand that a lot better. Even though this is a unique time where everybody had to turn to the internet for the most part, whether they just keep it to their own pages or they actually branch out and take these invitations to community forums and answer the tough questions, will really be what I think is surprising about this election. What works for these guys, because this is a new climate for all of us.
It is. I think.
But in terms of who I think, I mean, it really is close, because we don't really have a way of gauging it right now, right? I think that this is the big moment we're waiting for. Who's going to take this seat? And it's such an important seat. And those who haven't voted yet, I really urge you to think very deeply about who is representing our island. Think about their actions, think about their words. It's absolutely normal in a campaign to question when somebody is under investigation. It's absolutely normal in a campaign to talk about their record. And yet these things have been portrayed as personal attacks, but they're not. They're actually like legitimate questions that the congressman has an answer to. And so if you can't answer tough questions, if you can't talk directly to the people outside of your filtered pages, then how well will you be able to represent us for the next 2 years?
Yeah, I think the biggest win for Congressman San Nicolas has been that he hasn't been made to answer to any of the, and it's crazy if it's one thing and you want to play victim, but it's just the ethics investigation, the FEC violations, the allegations of the affair, the allegations of forging the dad's signature, the allegations of receiving, over the limit donations, the, missing work half the time. I mean, all of these things, they just add up. And and again, coming on the link and not being an adult enough to stay on the phone and answer questions. I mean, childish, very childish to hang up. But I want to go to what you said about the online. Of course, he's going to get the sympathy online because that's how our people are. If anybody posts a picture of themselves in the hospital, I mean, there might be those of us who see it maybe for milking or, whatever. But people are going to go on and they're going to say, hey, get better soon. So, again, the online presence with Congressman San Nicolas, you're right. I think this is going to be a big test because he's absolutely huge on Facebook. Totally AWOL, absent, invisible in the real world. And I think 2020 real world's where it really counts. Let's go on to Sean Gumatautau. Of course, the man of many hats. Sean, your thoughts, congressional race.
Well, I'm shocked at the surprise healing in 72 hours and the way that it all played out. Believe it or not, right on the link. And everyone on this call will agree that if you miss anything on the link, you've missed a lot. So in terms of his political career, I think he showed a lot of what he's all about with his interaction with you guys last week. Now, in terms of the end of the day tomorrow, I've had the privilege to work with Jerry on last congressional campaign. And I will tell you that for Will Castro, if his entire game, which started, it seemed like in January plus, and he probably got derailed with COVID, with Bob Underwood jumping in the race, it looks like it's going to be a tough road ahead. I mean, when I look back at the some of the stats back in 2000, I think was the last time Robert Underwood ran, he had close to 26,000 folks who backed him. Obviously, we do not expect 26,000 people to continue to be around and supporting Bob Underwood close to 20 years later, but we don't expect 24,000 to come to the polls tomorrow because of what's happened with COVID. And then obviously the traditional 69, it seems like that we're stuck in that 69% voter turnout since 2000. So at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, it looks likely that unless something happened with his ground game, it's likely that Robert Underwood just might have won his 6th term as a delegate to the U.S. House of Representatives.
Wow. Jerry Crisostomo, former Republican Party chair, let's go over to you. Curious your thoughts on the congressional race.
Yeah, I think, the noise level obviously has been, or the action has been with the 2 Democratic congressional candidates it's almost like one-sided. Robert Underwood has been campaigning since the primary, has been the only visible candidate out there. And then into the general, the incumbent was almost non-existent, except for the past, 2 days? And then, I have every confidence in Will Castro, our Republican candidate for the delegate. He has been out there. He has a ground game. And this election, like no other, I think the ground game is really question mark too, because we can't go canvassing, we can't hold rallies, we can't, visit the voters. It's all through social media or through advertising. I think Robert Underwood has done that. Will Castro has done that. So I think it's going to be between the 2 of them, with Will Castro coming out ahead Tuesday night or Wednesday morning.
Thank you, Jerry. Julian.
Yeah, hi. Well, I'm not really going to say anything about or narratively, really, because the thing that I believe, which is a bit different than anyone else, is that I think that the race is basically between Robert Underwood and Mike. I don't think that Will Castro really plays into it that much, except that he might take one or the other. And my best guess is that it'll be pretty close, and that Robert might end up winning outright in the election, or it may end up going to a runoff.
Wow.
And that's really all that I can think about it.
Come on, nothing juicy, Julian. I know you used to work for the congressman.
Well, I know he's kind of afraid of you and has kind of shied away from appearing on the link or appearing in any sort of way where you would be covering him. And I was kind of surprised the other day when he had an interview with you over the phone, even if he or over the internet, even if he ended up canceling it and running away. I was very surprised by that. I think that it speaks to a state of mind that is not a good thing, and I think he should seek help.
Oh, what did you think about his 72-hour healing? And what kind of help are you talking about?
I think he needs some counseling.
Someone had made a joke to me over the weekend, and not to make light of anyone's mental health situation, but they had said that when he was discharged from GMH, he should have went in and checked in at behavioral health, because obviously there are if you examine, and I'm not even kidding here, guys, if you examine a lot of this, like paranoia that everyone's out to get him, the overinflated self-importance. There are really some issues there. I mean, classic issues psychologically that, I mean, anybody could Google. And anyway, let's go on to Dr. Mike Bavacqua.
The current president. There was a lot of similarity, even in the rhetoric around getting sick, and even just this obsession with the use of social media, the incoherent sort of fragments that were coming out. Everybody's out to get him. It was very bizarre. I mean, throughout his entire term, I've heard people compare him to Trump, but of course Trump's means is Twitter and his is Facebook. But it was a little troubling because for me, I was like, wow, does he speak this way usually, right? Just sort of like kind of going off about when is enough with these people, you know, like, and it was kind of like very unfounded. There was no context, right? And so, yes, we understand that he was in the hospital. Nobody at all like said that they were not empathetic for him being sick, but to question, you know, going into a government quarantine facility that is meant for people who have tested positive means if they get exposure to pneumonia from someone who doesn't have COVID, that's even more deadly for them. Like, that's not thinking that through, you know, and that is concerning. These policies are in place for a very good reason to keep people from dying, right? So, you know, to question that is absolutely important. I want our governor to question when people violate, you know, quarantine facilities, because they're meant to be quarantine facilities with strict rules. Yeah. So anyways, yes, I think that was very troubling.
Yeah. And, would we have seen the same level of scrutiny if it was Congressman Underwood that went into the government isolation facility?
I would have absolutely, if he did not test positive for COVID and went into a facility that was only for people who tested positive for COVID, I would hope that they would call him out too. Absolutely.
Even if he was clinically diagnosed.
Question whether he was sick or not.
Oh, no, yeah, I'm not saying that he would have done that. I'm just saying that would we have seen the same level of scrutiny?
But I'm kind of going wrong exactly what you're saying. And Julian, when you said he was afraid of Chris, I mean, we don't want, at least I don't want a representative who's afraid of basically anything. Mm-hmm.
I'm really nothing to be afraid of. I mean, I ask an obvious question and I just expect people to answer it, especially at that. I mean, you're a freaking congressman. Put on your big boy pants, ask, you know, answer the, it's so basic. I don't even know why I have to sit here and defend that we should be able to ask our duly elected congressman questions about his voting record. I mean, it's insane that I have to sit here and say, oh, well, we just want to ask him questions. But we want to move on to Dr. Bavacqua here.
So that's, so that leads me to, I guess, my contribution. And that, you know, in a democracy, the health of a democracy often comes down to whether people can discern between fantasy, sort of candidate-created fantasy, and reality. Because there still are objective truths and measures, right? And so one thing that we see is that when you have a first-term congressman sort of put out there that he has accomplished more in a year than his predecessors have in 20 plus years, but then you have his supporters kind of putting that out there, and then you have, but there's nothing in the record that indicates any sort of monumental achievement. There's nothing that in the record on any level that indicates that he has changed the game, that he's changed the paradigm, that he's gotten stuff for Guam that it couldn't have gotten otherwise. There's absolutely zero evidence except for his Facebook page. And so we kind of get a sense of his approach to politics there. He's acting like a congressman who's been in office for 20 years and you don't have the right to challenge him about anything. He acts like somebody who puts out there that he's already done more than anybody else. But in a democracy, if a democracy is healthy, then they can call people out on that. Then the populace can see the record and see the candidate, and they can discern, no, this guy hasn't done that. This guy's full of it. But so that'll be a test for Guam, though, this week, is can your average person understand the difference? Because, you know, democracies always have that glitch, right? Do you vote for people that you like, or do you vote for people that are good? And sometimes they match, sometimes they don't. Sometimes politicians can get elected for long periods of time who never accomplish anything, but have a good rapport with people, or people see something in them that they like. And so Tuesday will be a big test for that on Guam. The current delegate, and I track these things. You know, I look carefully at these things. I went to his website almost every other day to track his progress for the past 2 years. And he is probably the most underperforming Congress person in the entire Congress in terms of appearances in the media, in terms of talking to his constituents, in terms of producing things for the community that he represents. And so if people on Guam can't recognize that, it's a much deeper concern than about sort of the type of democracy that we have.
Right.
Can I just add, as point of reference, his colleague to the north, Mr. Kilili Sablan, this past term has had 5 bills passed and 10 amendments. And the only amendment or the only bill that Michael St. Nicholas had was something that was just to change funding language in a bill that had already been passed. It was a technical correction. Yet, like Mr. Bavako or Dr. Bavako was saying, he's, you know, holding it up as if he had done something truly amazing, when in fact it was 0.9 or 0.1% of a bill that he had to do, because 99% of the work was done. Treasury gave him the language to insert into the bill, and that was it. He didn't do any work on that. Nothing.
Yeah, I mean, but to be fair, people take credit for stuff they got nothing to do with all the time. It's called politics.
Right. And at the end of the day, you know, we all wish Congressman St. Nicholas, you know, good health. You know, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I just went off of what he said. He said he was sick. And so, you know, our prayers to him, and hopefully he's recovering from this viral pneumonia / clinically diagnosed COVID. So, and in terms of his mental health, you know, I don't think that's fair to say, you know, if people are thinking that he has a mental problem when we're not here to diagnose that and we don't have the background to do so.
Right on, right on. Yeah, I want to just say that you go into the hospital, that's one thing. I mean, we definitely, I don't want to see anybody get sick, you know, and, but that doesn't mean there are all these other issues that he hasn't addressed yet. You know what I mean? Those are still out there. They still haven't been addressed for the entire length of this campaign. And that's the problem I have, is that I just really believe that every single other elected official on this island has no problem answering the questions.
And
You know
we
what I
have
mean?
given him that opportunity.
I mean,
And
every time.
You're right, though. We were surprised, too, that he agreed to come on the link. But I had reached out to him that morning, and he agreed to come on. And we were kind of surprised that he was speaking to us from a hospital bed. But I do appreciate the fact that he did come on, although he did hang up, because that was his opportunity to talk about everything else. So it is what it is.
Amen. Let's move on now to the to the legislative race here. This is pretty interesting. This I just feel like there's some definite clowns running, and that because of the low voter turnout, there are whole ass candidates who got nothing to offer us but the people who are behind them. And so I feel like with this low voter turnout and the COVID, the system is ripe for manipulation, and that's what really scares me. I mean, all I can say is that if anyone gets in who, you know, we think shouldn't have got in, I mean, obviously there's going to be a lot of scrutiny for the next couple of years. But we'll just go ahead and start with you, Sean. Your thoughts on the legislative race and Democrat or Republican majority when it's all said and done.
You know, a little bit different from our talk on the delegate race, but for me, I'm still, like I talked to you guys about this last week, I still believe there is a strong chance for an 8-7 majority. And whether or not it pivots to the Republicans or Democrats, I will say that I'm pretty excited that there's a strong chance that Republicans will take the majority for the first time. I want to say since 2003, if I'm not mistaken. And it's an interesting whole take, because over the weekend, you're getting bombed by a lot of different things on social media and the like. I'm not saying my votes are going to pivot one way or the other, but I will let all your listeners and viewers know that the Republican Party is bringing at least 3 more bigger names to this race in the midterm that, you know, really brought more of a following. Tony Adda, Frank Blas Jr., you add Joanne Brown, you add Chris Duenas. 4 right now, after losing Will and after losing Senator Munya. You're adding some quality people. At the end of the day, when it's all said and done, it looks like the majority could go back to Republicans. And I think for many people in this community, they've had enough of the leadership that has been driving an agenda that just does not meet the expectations of our community, especially pocketbook issues. And there's a strong chance that these folks can change that. And I'm actually excited for it. And again, if they're not listening to us right now on this call, pocketbook issues are going to drive the agenda for the next 2 years.
Victoria?
I mean, it really is, again, sort of an interesting time to see how effective these new means of kind of pushing for candidates will be. So you see the emergence of, on our end, the Finogi Coalition, sort of having regular forums and engaging with the candidates and growing a following in the way in which we're doing that. And then you have the Action PAC and two very different groups of people endorsing, Finogi Coalition didn't endorse candidates. The goal of the Finogi Coalition was to engage candidates on issues, it's particularly revolving around decolonization. That I appreciate what Sean said, that it really does come back down to, can people afford to feed their families, right? Or how are we going to survive in this really growing economic crisis in the middle of a pandemic? But we always want to elevate that conversation to ask, well, what are the limitations of our political status in that process? One of the things Action PAC is really pushing for is to increase support of the military buildup. But again, it's still continuing to happen not on our terms, and that has destructive impacts in the longer term. And so you see these two groups with very different interests sort of emerging in this particular campaign. And so I'm very curious to see how effective their techniques were versus the Finogi Coalition, and also to really kind of see what the community does want, right? It's been a really interesting time, I think, in terms of even trying to elevate the conversation to say, okay, what can Guam do differently, right? Like, why are we just defaulting to the only thing that's going to save us is, if not tourism, then the military? Where is sort of the more creative outlook? Where is the realistic outlook that our antiquated political status is not going to advance us, especially not during this time? And so, those are things that I'm curious about, whether, these forums were effective either way, right? Whether the Action PAC really, just putting out a list of candidates and saying, these are who we support, these are people that will put money in your pockets, but we have no actual evidence of that. We don't have, a lot of things I keep hearing in the campaign ads is, I have a plan, but no one's actually sharing their plans. So, as a voter, I keep that in mind. I want concrete evidence of things that people have done and things that they will do to change things, not to just give us more of the same.
Julian?
Oh, hi. Well, I'm not going to do a lot of prognostication. I kind of think that the overall lay of the land favors Democrats rather than Republicans. I don't think it's going to be an 8-7 Republican victory. And part of that is because I don't even think that all of these Republican candidates that are prominent have actually made a serious effort to run for office. I think that Frank Blas and Chris Duenas have been phoning it in, and I'm not sure if they're gonna just happen to make it in because the field is kind of weak, or whether they're going to fail in their endeavor altogether. But if they do fail, it's their own fault because they really didn't put themselves out there. I'm a little concerned that the Republican Party and the leadership and the candidates have taken on board a lot of fringe and truly damaging ideas about how you handle a pandemic, about how to take away the tools in the toolbox from the administration in making sure that people are facing some repercussions if they happen to do things that are very clearly damaging to the community. You know, there are plenty of Republicans who have come right out and are introducing bills and in order to take away the tools that already exist. And I think that's damaging to their chances as well. You know, that they're so out of touch with reality that they're pandering to these crazies on the internet. And, you know, as for our own organization, Progressive Democrats of Guam, we approached anybody who we could get a hold of to try to get our issues or answers to questions that we raise on unemployment insurance and not laying off a bunch of GovOne workers needlessly. You know, providing PPE to folks out there who are having to work. And, you know, we didn't receive that many responses from Republicans, but we reached out to them and we were very open about, I mean, our process absolutely was based on policy and not on politics. And we actually rated two Republicans considerably higher than we rated some of the Democrats. So, you know, I wish they would have engaged more with that. We came up with our list of candidates that we believe are most progressive based on their responses. And, you know, by and large, I think that it will be a relatively good result. That's what I anticipate. I anticipate something of the order of 9-6 Democratic majority. But, you know, it's possible I'm wrong. There's nothing really to go on in terms of surveys, so it's a little difficult to gauge. It's sort of you make your best guess based on very inadequate information.
All right. Thanks, Julian. So, Phil, out of touch Republicans?
Thank you. Thanks, Sabrina. First off, as you may know, I tend to lean Republican. And as far as, and I'm a proud American. I don't want to be independent. I want to stay American. But I do like Victoria even to say people have a plan. You know what? Martin never said I have a plan. Martin said I have a dream. And that's what I think we're looking for in some of our candidates. What is your dream? How are we going to go there? There are real efforts going forward to look at how to diversify the economy. I'm in several of those groups. And actually, we spent about an hour and a half with the governor on it last week. And I was glad going in to see that she had actually read and thought about our suggestions going into it. I think I don't know who would take the majority. I'm leaving again. Republican will take it on a thin majority. I don't think it'll be 9-6 Julian Democrats. And I say that because I don't hear a lot of support for most incumbents, and especially from the private sector. And nobody's talking about taking jobs away from the public sector. So let's stop saying that. But we are saying giving jobs to the private sector. Getting people back up, and the legislature hasn't done a thing about that. If you recall, the first thing they wanted to do was double the salaries of people out there working, including private sector people, and make it retroactive like a month or 2 months earlier, which had been totally burdensome. But as this all finishes, again, I think it's going to be Republican, the thin majority, because a lot of those incumbents are not going. When I talk to people who've already voted, for how many incumbents did you vote? It's usually 1 or 2, or I think the highest I've heard is 5. So people are just not happy with the people in the legislature. And Sean, I think it was 2006 when we took the election, when the issue was GRT. I was chair at that time, and which is unrelated, we taken the majority. But there was just dissatisfaction with the legislature, that current legislature, which is why the Republicans were able to take it. And that's what I see here again. We have some really good candidates. We have some candidates that others don't know, including some of us. And I would say that on the Democratic side too, there's this one of the Democratic candidates, John Ananich, I think is his name. I heard his ad on the radio. I liked it. It's law enforcement, things like that. But his first sign that I saw, I am the leader you need. Well, no, I don't need anybody except my parents. And I thought that was just a little bit too much to say.
Yeah, that was an overreach a little bit. Small kind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's probably, but I will say here I am. I'm a Monday morning quarterback by career. Those who have thrown their hats into the arena and taken out the sword and are fighting, my hat's off to all of them.
Yeah, that was a little much for me. Hey, you never heard of me, and you might have heard some shady things about me, but I'm the leader you need. Hey, nice to meet you. Jerry, let's go to Jerry. Your thoughts on this legislative race?
Well, I think I echo what Sean and Phil has said. Of course, we're biased, right? But I think at the end of the day, it's going to boil down to name recognition. When voters go in to vote, they look at the names and they look at, who's approached me, who has asked for my vote, do I recognize the name? Fortunately, the Republicans have 4 former senators that are running, Frank Blas and Tony Ada, Chris Duenas, Joanne Brown. I think they'll add to the 3 incumbents that are running for re-election. And I think for the newcomers, people like Ken Leon Guerrero, J.I. Cruz, you got Vince Borja, you got Michelle Armenta. I think those candidates, those newcomers, I think offer so much more than the Democratic slate would. So I think we have a shot, 8-7, maybe 9-6, but I agree with Sean. I think it'll be a slim 8-7. The Democrats are the party in power today. So every election, the voters evaluate the party in power. I mean, 2 years ago, the Republicans got a licking, right? They kicked us out of Avenue. The Democrats increased their supermajority. I think this time around, because of many different issues, the economy, COVID, I think the 30,000 plus unemployed folks, hopefully they've come out to vote and show their dissatisfaction. I think although the turnout is expected to be around 60-some%, still very low, but I think the voters will judge the party in power. And at the end of the day, they're not satisfied. The Democratic majority in that legislature, their priorities are whacked. They've not done one iota to help the people during this pandemic. So the voters know that the Republican Party has a message. Our slate of candidates have a message. And I think you'll see that Tuesday night or early Wednesday morning. At the end of the day, it is a pocketbook issue. It is about the economy. I think we're learning to live with this virus. But at the end of the day, people want their jobs back. They want to be safe, but they want to feed their families. And I think that's where the Republican Party will be the option and the alternative in controlling and getting the majority in the legislature.
Phil Leon Guerrero.
So I want to contribute maybe my perspective that can dispel, maybe even contradict some of my friends that are here on this call. When I hear talk about there's an upswell of grassroots people that are upset with the majority of the incumbents in the legislature, but then I see a political action committee that basically is comprised of most of our businesses, not able to put together a 100-person protest, I start to wonder how big this groundswell of opposition actually is. When I see that, I don't know what the last count is, but about 11,000 people have voted early, that's not even half the amount of people that are unemployed right now. That's not even half the amount of parents that have a public school student that's focused on, that's dealing with distance learning right now. That's not even half the amount of people that work in the private sector. So I'm also just questioning, are we in this smaller circle of people that are more engaged, maybe have more at stake, maybe have more of a buy-in? Are we maybe assuming that there are more grassroots, that there is more of a grassroots reflection of what we are actually feeling and what we are thinking. And I believe that it would be hard to predict exactly what's going to happen, precisely because we have such a small turnout so far, and because the way that Tuesday is going, the greatest barometer that we have locally for these midterm elections are the exit polls that UOG usually does. But I don't know how accurate these exit polls are going to be if we have over 11,000 people voting before the polls even open. I wouldn't be surprised if it's an 8-7 majority one way or the other. I wouldn't be surprised if the 15th place finisher of the legislature determines who gets the majority. And I wouldn't be surprised if the person who finishes 16th is finishing within a margin that might trigger some sort of recount. Wow. What I do also want to address is this, I hear it a lot. It's this false dichotomy between what the Democrats and the majority of this legislature are doing, are pursuing, are supporting, and what the Republicans are doing, supporting, or opposing. If we think about some of the most controversial policies this term, minimum wage was passed by both Democrats and Republicans. This budget, which includes the continuation of this very bad for a lot of PACs out there, 5% BPT, was passed by both Republicans and Democrats. When Republicans have had the opportunity to lower the BPT, they didn't pursue it further in the legislature. And one thing that I'm not hearing from any of the PACs that are pushing this BPT issue, nor am I hearing from any of the candidates that are pushing this BPT issue to lower it back down to 4%, is what are they going to cut in the government of Guam? That's about a $60 million cut in Gov Guam that you're going to make by lowering the business privilege tax back down to 4%. And I would find it hard to accomplish that cut without touching personnel at all. That's where the talking point comes from, Phil Flores, that cut to the BBT is a cut to the Gov Guam workforce, because it would be very difficult to accomplish that cut without touching the Gov Guam employment.
Phil, I'll argue with, I know I'm jumping out of turn here, but I'll argue that with you every day of the week. There's so much waste other than overstaffed. And then you don't fire people. There's attrition for the unnecessary positions that we've been told exist right now, that you don't have to fire somebody just when they retire or when they go elsewhere. You just don't necessarily replace them. I was 4 years chairman at the hospital. We were able to reduce our FTEs by over 200 people just by doing that in an effort to save money. But we did not fire anybody, and you don't have to fire somebody to reduce the cost in this government, Phil.
Well, what I will say is whether you're doing it through attrition, whether you're doing it through layoffs, whether you're doing it through furloughs or retirements, $60 million is going to have to be accomplished by lowering the Gov Guam workforce.
Well, what I will also say is RT being paid now, period. And what I will also say about the benefit for businesses too, because I think that, you know, there's an assumption here from a lot of consumers out there that if the business privilege tax is lowered to 4%, then I can afford to grocery shop again. I can afford to go out to eat again. And the cold hard facts is this: in order for a business to save $10,000 in a BPT reduction, they would have to make gross receipts of $1 million a year. $10,000 in savings from this lowered BPT isn't even enough to rehire one minimum wage worker. And it certainly isn't going to be enough to lower anybody's prices with all of the back rent that they have to pay, with all of the other supplies that they have to purchase during this pandemic. I'm not saying that businesses can't use relief, but I do want to be very accurate when we say what's going to happen to the government of Guam when we lower the business privilege tax, and what benefits are there going to be to the actual end consumers when we lower the business privilege tax. Okay. Because I can near guarantee you that it's not going to be a lowering of prices. It's too costly to do business on Guam to lower prices, even with a BPT reduction.
All right.
Thank you. Just one quick thing, Phil. Sure. It's not $10,000 that somebody wouldn't be paying the government. Right now, we're paying $50,000 on that million. And also,
what I'm saying is, yes, exactly, Phil. So you're paying $50,000.
If you don't think $10,000 is very much money to a business, it's obvious you haven't run one, but thanks.
Well, I'm saying $10,000 won't allow you to rehire even one minimum wage worker. And when I say $10,000, what I'm saying is you're paying $50,000 on your million. When you lower it to 4%, you're going to pay $40,000, which means that you save $10,000. Now, where is that $10,000 going to go? Probably to back rent, probably to pay for PPE, but you won't be able to hire one full-time employee, and you won't be able to reduce prices to consumers. So again, I just want to be honest here. When we lower things for the businesses, it's going to help the businesses. Yes, it is expensive to do business on Guam and they could use relief. Yes, but that's not going to trickle down to consumer prices, and it is going to have a direct effect to the size of the GovGuam workforce.
Thank you.
That's all I was trying to say.
Let's go over to Peter. Peter, we have Peter and Dr. Mike left on this question. Good talk though, guys. Peter, go ahead.
I'll be quick. I voted for Phil Leon Guerrero's Nino, Ken Leon Guerrero. So that, I just want to see him get in, because I've never seen a candidate run and also run against other candidates. So that's a novelty for this race. I just want to see him sit down and I want to see what happens. It's a exercise in curiosity. And then I just wanted to address real quick John Adanich. He also, like other panel members have stated, talks a big game. If you look at Frank Leon Guerrero, J.I. Cruz, Fred Berdalio, who are also running on public safety, their resumes are head and shoulders above Mr. Adanich. But I voted for him too, because I want to see him deliver on the promises that he's been making. That's all I got.
Well, you're a risky voter. You're like, let's see what happens with this guy. Dr. Mike.
And so in terms of the legislature, I don't know, I think that Democrats will retain the majority, just because on the Republican side, there's a lot of new faces, but some of them really haven't sort of established themselves in the community yet. And what I've noticed is that some of them aren't even clear on what exactly the role of a senator is. So I've seen some candidates sort of make statements where they believe, for example, that the legislature runs public health. And so that if they were elected, they would do this in public health, not understanding that the legislature doesn't run public health. I've seen some candidates not know the amount of senators that are elected every 2 years to the legislature. I've seen a lot of them not understand how bills are made, sort of, and how the process is. And so I think that that's part of the issue with the Republicans this time, is that they have a lot of energy. You know, they've got a lot of people that are passionate about trying to impact the island, trying to sort of make it better based on what they believe. But you also have to remember that when you get elected into that office, you have to be better than your average person. You have to sort of have a greater understanding about all these issues. And so you can't just promise the moon and the stars, because so that's one of the issues, is if we elect a bunch of people who run on these huge promises that they have no plans or no ability to deliver, you're just perpetuating the problem. You're not making it any better by electing an outside candidate, because, in a democracy, you run based on how well you can understand the pandering, the promises they make with their record and their actual ability, and where they fit in the structure, right? So if somebody tells you they can do all of this stuff, you may want them to do it, but if you're a strong, democratically engaged citizen, then you may look at them and say, there's no way they could do all that stuff. Part of me likes that they say that, but on the other hand, I have to also wonder, are they talking down to me by promising me everything in the universe, even when they can't deliver it? And so that's why I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I feel that on the Republican side, a lot of energy and excitement, but they haven't really done the work to ground the candidates and really connect them into the process of governance yet. That's my feeling on it.
Thank you. I'm the leader you need, though. Humbly saying. Guys, it's been great. Again, if you want to jump on our election coverage, shoot me a WhatsApp and we'll fold you in and give you a good time. We're going all night, right, Bree?
Yes, we are.
Phil, Pete, Mike, Julian, Sean, Victoria and Jerry, it's been great. Thanks for joining us for the after party, and good luck. May the best people win. Truly mean that. Okay?
All right.
Está. Adios, guys.
Bye. Hope we see you tomorrow.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. That's always fun. Good times there. Diverse panel there of 8. You had some Republicans, you had some Democrats, you had some, I don't know what the hell they are, but it's good talk.
Definitely. I'm excited for tomorrow.
Man, I'm pumped. Oh, this is gonna be fun, and we're gonna bring in